Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of Fully Endorsed here on the Kaiju Noir channel. With me, as always, is Kaiju Noir.
Surprise, surprise.
Indeed. And today, we're going to be discussing the Odyssey from 1997. Now, as I mentioned very briefly at the end of the last episode, this is technically cheating. We are breaking the rules of the podcast just slightly. Well, bending them, perhaps, is a better way of putting it. Andres has seen this, and I knew that there was a chance that he might have, because this gets shown a lot in schools. Mm-hmm. Many of you listening to this podcast have perhaps seen it as well in sort of English classes, and usually around like the high school or middle school level. Yeah, he has technically seen it before, but it was only the once. It was in school, and his memories of it were super vague. Mm-hmm. So I said, you know what, fuck it. And that's how we arrived at this today. So yeah, the Odyssey, obviously a major facet of Greek mythology, a very famous tale. Andres, I suppose the best thing to do would be to begin by giving a little bit of your background with the subject material. How much do you know about Greek mythology? Is this a subject that you're very familiar with?
I would say, yeah. Back in, ever since elementary school, it was roughly around the time Hercules came out.
Yeah, honey, you mean Hercules.
Honey, you mean Hercules. So Disney's Hercules came out, and after that, I became super obsessed with Greek mythology, because I thought it was, the coolest shit ever. Because at that point, I was already a Godzilla fan, and so I loved anything that had to do with giant monsters. And as you know, Greek mythology is filled to the brim with all sorts of creatures, monsters, gods, and warriors and heroes. It was kind of like what Marvel and DC comics are for us today. That was Greek mythology for people back in the day. And so it was really cool to see such a to discover such a wide array of monsters and gods and heroes. And so during elementary school, I used to check out from my school library as many books as I can that dealt with Greek mythology in order to learn as much about this amazing lore from a bygone age. And so I ended up learning about Perseus, about Hercules, about Odysseus, about what was his I think it was Icarus.
Yeah, Icarus. Yeah.
Icarus, yeah. Learned about stuff like the Minotaur, Medusa, Pegasus, the Hydra. Also, around this time I also learned about the Zodiac. So there's a Greek myth behind each of the Zodiac stories. Like, for instance, the whole battle between Hercules and the Hydra ended up leading to the creation of the Cancer, what do you call it? The Cancer, what's it called with the stars? Constellation.
The constellation.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. The constellation. So it was something I was very obsessed with throughout roughly most of elementary and middle school. And by the time we got to high school, it's I got to discover that love again, all over again, when we were assigned to read the Odyssey, much like a lot of people back in the day. And I'm very curious, this is my question to everybody who's listening. I'm curious if because Dylan and I, we are children of the 90s. And so I'm very curious to know, for anyone who was born in the 2000s or born in the 80s, people younger and older than us, were you, or anyone, younger, and even beyond those decades, were any of you also assigned to read the Odyssey as well back in the day, back in high school? This was a thing, a facet. This played a big part of my childhood. Of course, I grew up on a lot of those Ray Harryhausen movies, like Jason and the Argonauts, and definitely Clash of the Titans. Clash of the Titans may have very well have been my very first Ray Harryhausen movie, and that was something...
it definitely was mine. I know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. And still one of my favorites to this day. I will I will argue with anybody that it's actually better than Jason and the Argonauts. I've had this argument before with people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you disagree, fight me. No,
with your army of skeletons.
It's with your army of skeletons, and I'll bring the Kraken, and we'll see who wins.
Yeah, you fuckers. So yeah, that's pretty much like my history with Greek mythology. And how about you, dude?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. I think a lot of people our age, nerds in particular, go through a Greek mythology phase at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think it sticks with some of us, and some of us not as much. Yeah, I've always been very big into that sort of thing. And the Odyssey is a very big part of that. I think Odysseus is probably my favorite Greek hero. Mm-hmm. Because of his use of cunning, and he outsmarts his opponents more often than not. He relies more on his brains than his brawn. You mentioned that mm-hmm. Greek mythology was sort of what like superhero stories are for us today. That's what this was for the Greeks, mm-hmm. and a lot of people make that comparison. In that regard, I would say that Odysseus is like the first like Reed Richards type.
Ooh, yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, it's a big part of my fandom, my personality. I have a passion for the classics and for anything sort of Greco-Roman. So, mm-hmm. So yeah, big fan of all of that. And when I was growing up, Kevin Sorbo was Hercules.
Honey, you mean Huncules?
Honey, you mean Huncules? And yeah, so that's the era we came from. Fucking that goofy shit. And then you remember that animated movie where it was Hercules and Xena? It was like a straight to.
There was an animated Hercules and Xena movie?
Yes. Oh my God, this is not a fully endorsed, but there's a straight-to-video Hercules and Xena animated movie where they had to team up together to fight the Titans.
Oh my God. This looks like something I would have passed by in my childhood at like a swap meet or something, but I've never seen anything of. I know there were crossovers in the actual like TV series, and
Xena was a spin-off of Hercules.
Right. But it's like, I'm looking at the images right here. It kind of looks a little bit like the Mortal Kombat animated series.
The old one? Yeah. Yeah. That's not... You're not far off.
What is up with these backgrounds?
Oh, they're pretty... Maybe we should do another series that's like the opposite of this, where it's like, hey, here's some shit. Like, look at this. This is terrible.
Wow, man. Wow.
I have a lot of nostalgia for that movie, but it's not very good. There is this one hilarious.
That is quite the chin on Xena.
Yeah, they went all out, didn't they?
Yeah, it's like they're trying to do Bruce Timm, but failing at it.
Yeah, they're trying to do Bruce Timm, but then they've got these weird, like, Ren and Stimpy-ish, like, backgrounds. Like,
just look at this shit, right? I'm sharing you with right here.
Trust me, I know. I've seen the movie.
And even like Hercules in this one image I'm sharing, even he's like, God damn, what happened to you, bitch?
Whenever people complain about Disney's Hercules, honey, you mean Hercules? I'm like, look, it could have been so much worse. Like, y'all don't understand.
Yeah, and I like Hercules, Disney's Hercules.
But we're not here to talk about Disney's Hercules or Kevin Sorbo's Hercules.
No, we're not talking about Hercules at all. He doesn't even...
Arnold Schwarzenegger's Hercules.
He is not appearing in this film.
No Hercules is. We're here to talk about the Odyssey. So, where to begin? I guess general thoughts, and then we'll get into the specifics. So, what were your sort of general impressions of this 3-hour epic?
It surprisingly held up a lot, and I think a lot of it is due to how well it was sort of treated. I feel like when you hear the words TV movie, usually you tend to think either like Sci-Fi Channel original movies or like the Lifetime original movies, you tend to think of like very cheap.
It's a mini series, so that there's a little bit more prestige with the mini series with your typical TV movie, you know.
Right.
Usually, sometimes you get, you know, Stephen King's Langoliers, and that's a whole different story.
Or It, well, for better or worse.
Yeah. Both of those though, are they're good for other reasons.
So
scaring the little girl.
I just remember that. So when it comes to like TV productions, you really don't think like TV productions and Greek epic myths could go well together, and especially
back then. Yeah, especially back then. This is way before. You know, now TV is sort of a whole other animal. You know, you've got your Games of Thrones, and you know,
you got your DC, your what do you call it, the CW Arrowverse Flash shows.
Right.
Certain people may have, you know, issues with that even to this very day. But yeah, or heck, Doctor Who. Doctor Who has had some very ambitious stuff over, you know, when it comes to New Who.
Yeah, that's on a BBC budget, which is like, you know, even lower. So it's TV's come a long way, but this was in 1997.
Right. So for 1997, I feel like it definitely holds up a lot, and I think it comes with a very smart and clever use of their budget and relying a lot on pure raw performances from their cast and from their actors, as well as a very, you know, professional, almost like I would say it feels like this is the closest we ever could have gotten to like that sort of old time, because like I'm very surprised that we never had that many cinematic adaptations of the Odyssey. And so I feel like when you compare this to like Jason of the Argonauts or Clash of the Titans, this feels like the closest we ever could have gotten to a film of that caliber. And I feel like it is impossible to make a movie this good in that style this day and age, because looking at the Clash of the Titans, Wrath of the Titans movies, the recent ones, you can tell like it's just a bunch of CGI and trying to modernize it all over the place. It's like it's essentially got that sort of classic cinema feel, if that makes any sense.
Right.
As opposed to trying to modernize it for the young kids today these days. And so like it was sort of like in this very interesting period in the late 90s. And so yeah, because of that, it's definitely got a very unique quality that I think could stand on its own as a really good introduction and a really good retelling of this famous story.
Yeah.
And so what were your thoughts then?
I mean, same. I mean, I endorsed this for a reason. I really love this. I've seen it several times over the years. Having first been introduced to it in school, you know, like everybody else. And yeah, I think it's really great. I think it holds up incredibly well, you know, for the time and for the budget and for the medium. You know, it's so smartly produced, and I think that goes a long way. Because, you know, this has a pretty decent budget for the time and for being a TV miniseries, but it's still, you know, it's still a TV budget, and they have to stretch the dollar a little bit here and there, and I think they do a really fantastic job of you know, a lot of the effects work is practical. When they do have to do CGI, they're usually very good about, you know, doing it very quickly and sort of keeping it like off on the edges of the frame, or like, you know, doing things to help it not stick out as bad as it could.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is due to their reliance on practical effects, and a lot of that is done, surprisingly enough, from Jim Henson Studios or Jim Henson Productions, and they did a fantastic work on the few sort of fantastical creature effects that we see in this movie. Stuff that comes to mind would be the Cyclops, for instance, which was done by a real dude with like what was it? I don't think there was any Do you think there was any CGI enhancements for his face, or was it just all like animatronic props and makeup for him?
I think it was all practical, because honestly, if they had done CGI touch-ups on the face in 1997, I think it would stick out and be more noticeable. Right.
There was also Scylla. That also looked really cool, very creepy, just as creepy as I remembered it in high school. They had a pretty interesting take on Charybdis as well, design-wise. Yeah, that was also very interesting. Where it kind of looked like somewhat of like a big squid, starfish textured mouth that just opens up and closes, and you never see the full body, because Charybdis was always described as being one giant gaping whirlpool mouth.
Yeah, it's almost plant-like. Also, there's something kind of like Venus flytrappy about it,
Very true. Yeah.
Sort of the long like fangs that they gave it and everything.
The other
similar thing with Scylla, also really nice, nasty fangs they gave that puppet.
Totally, yeah. And let's see. I guess apparently looking at Wikipedia, they also did the sea serpent monster that devours that one dude who was about to give out the secret of the Trojan horse near the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
Let's see. There was a talking animatronic pig that, for like half a second, you see him as like a half pig, half man before he turns back into his human form.
Yes. Yeah. And shout out to there was also a real pig, and shout out to that pig. That pig did some great acting. I'm not even kidding. There are scenes where they're like threatening to kill the pig, and you look at that pig, and that pig looks genuinely frightened.
Right.
It really sells the scene. I think the pig is one of the best actors in the movie, and perhaps the unsung hero of this entire production.
The true MVP there.
Yeah. In a star-studded cast, this pig is the one who really sells it.
Yeah. If there's one thing I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't incorporate into this adaptation, would be the sirens. And I think that's like a very famous part from the story where Odysseus, he really wanted to listen. Like, the whole idea behind the sirens is, if you don't know, they're a bunch of beautiful women, human, like they're beautiful creatures that look like female women. Sometimes they're described as like they've been reinterpreted throughout the ages as mermaids. They sing very lovely and lovingly, and so they draw the attention of soldiers who would then crash their boats into the rocks, and then the sirens then feast upon the soldiers. And so Odysseus had the idea of just having everybody cover their ears in wax, except for him. He has his men tie him to a post so that he can listen to their calls, and he can live to tell the tale. I guess from a cinematic point of view, there wouldn't be a whole lot of tension in that scene, so I guess I can sort of see why they took it out. But I just thought it was yeah,
it can be done. We've seen it done. Ray Harryhausen borrowed this same scenario in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad.
Really?
Yeah. Have you seen that movie?
I think I've seen it once, but I've kind of forgotten a lot of it because it's been years since then.
Yeah. He basically lifted that entire like siren thing and plopped it into the Sinbad movie. So it can be done. We've seen it done. I think the reason it was cut, if I had to guess, is just because of where it falls in the myth itself. Because if I'm remembering this correctly, Odysseus encounters the sirens when he's on his way to Hades to speak with what's his name, Tiresias, the blind prophet who is dead.
Right. Played by why am I blanking out on his name? God damn it, Christopher Lee. The
late great Christopher Lee, Prince of Darkness. Yes. Who's fantastic for the 1.5 minutes that he's in the movie. But anyway, I believe that he encounters the sirens on his way to that errand. And if you look at the way this miniseries is broken up, it's like part 1 pretty much ends with Cersei, played by Bernadette Peters, telling him that he needs to go to hell. And then,
literally.
And then part 2 opens with him going to hell and talking to Christopher Lee. And so that's like the breaking point. And so I think maybe they cut it just for that reason. It was like in the middle there, and maybe they weren't sure. Like maybe they just wanted to get to hell already, you know?
Yeah.
Because the second half of the miniseries is much more about Odysseus getting back to Ithaca and then, you know, reclaiming his throne from the suitors who have besieged the palace.
Right, and so like every single obstacle is always there to prevent him from reaching his destination, whereas with the sirens, they're not so much an obstacle, rather it's just a slight inconvenience, sort of, that he willingly put himself, exposed himself to.
Yeah, I think they needed to cut something for time, probably.
Yeah.
And they chose that because of where it fell in the story and how they had chosen to split up the miniseries.
Right.
That's my theory. That's just a theory. But
a Greek theory.
And I don't have anything else to say about that. But so yeah, that would be my guess. With the exceptions of the sirens, though, I think everything else is here, at least from what I can remember.
Same here, yeah. It has all the most important beats here that I at least as far as I can remember from my time reading the book way back when.
Yeah. So let's get into some specifics here. The cast of this thing is pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
There are a lot of high profile or mid profile guest stars in this. I already mentioned that Bernadette Peters plays Cersei. What's her name? Who plays Calypso in the second half?
Let's see here.
Vanessa Williams, I think.
Yes, that is her.
That's a pretty big name. Eric Roberts is in this.
Right, I was surprised that myself. Like, you were telling me, hey, do you recognize that guy? I was like, and you were like, it's Eric Roberts. I was like, oh shit. It's like, I didn't know he was acting ever since then. But then again, like, Eric Roberts is one of those actors who's kind of like has been in everything from The Dark Knight to Cool Cat Saves the Kids.
Exactly. Nothing cool about bringing a gun to school.
I play the tough guys. I play the tough guys and the good guys and the cool guys, and there's nothing cool about taking a gun to school.
I'm Eric Roberts. I've played the tough Eric and the cool Robert in a lot of movies.
Go to our audience who loves YouTube poops. Go watch the one on Cool Cat Saves the Kids.
Oh, it's a two-parter. It's wonderful.
You know which one we're talking about.
If you're a fan of Clear Talk Mastery YTPs, there's something in there for you. Now that we've alienated a large portion of the audience. Eric Roberts is in it. Who else? Who else is in this thing? Christopher Lee, you already mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who plays the wind god, Aeolus, I don't remember, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but he's got one of those faces. I know that I've seen him in a million things, and I just can't think of the man's name.
I'm looking at the credits here. Michael J. Pollard.
Michael J. Pollard, okay.
Yeah. Let's see. He had a supporting role as C.W. Moss in the film Bonnie and Clyde, which he got nominated in the Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor. Let's see. Was that the one with Bonnie and Clyde? Who was that? Was it what? Yeah. Warren Beatty. Yeah. Dick Tracy. I already saw that movie, but I don't remember Mike Pollard.
Right.
And let's see. There was also this one actress. What was it? It was. What was Odysseus's mother's name?
Oh, Anticlea? Or are you asking for the actress's name?
I guess like the actress's name, yeah.
Irene Papas, I think. She's a Greek actress.
Right. And we mentioned her because she was not only a great actress in the role, but she was also like one of the few actors in this movie about Greek people who was actually of Greek descent.
Yeah, she's really good at it too. She's a stone cold badass, that woman. She's so,
absolutely, yeah. She commands the scenes.
There's a ton of screen presence in this.
Totally, yeah. And let's see. As for Armand Asante, like, he definitely brings his A game for this role, and it's very unfortunate that I haven't seen a whole lot of stuff with him. I guess, is he mostly a TV actor?
Oh, well, let's take a look at his credits here and find out.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it looks like he's definitely done a lot of film stuff. Oh, I guess he's still acting to this very day, and he's done a lot of television roles.
He's definitely a name that I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he's definitely one of those like actors who's constantly finding work. So he seems to be one of those like very reliable actors. And I guess one of his biggest roles was John Gotti for the 1996 version of John Gotti. So,
yes, not John Travolta.
Not the John Travolta Gotti. That's a movie I want to see purely out of like morbid curiosity.
Oh boy.
Ooh-wee.
Apparently he was in Judge Dredd. Was he the villain in that?
Let's see here. Let's see. He was Rico. Rico. And Rico... Yeah, I think Rico was the bad guy from Judge Dredd. Yes, nice. He was. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so I guess he was the bad guy. He played opposite to Sylvester Stallone. That's pretty awesome. Shame it had to be. Yeah, it's a shame that it had to be Judge Dredd. He was the guy who responded to that with... You betrayed the law! That was him, unfortunately.
Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on his performance as Odysseus in the Odyssey. Yes. He's really good. He has a sort of... He does a good job of portraying Odysseus's cunning, and also his sort of... Yes, that too. As well as his desire to go home, his
relationship, his relationship with Penelope, his wife.
Yes, he has very expressive eyes. Also, he's sort of like Peter Lorre in that way. He gets a lot across just with his face. This is fantastic. He plays everything in this from, quiet, calm, like moments of joy to absolute like bloodlust rage. Right,
especially at the end when he's just murdering all those suitors.
Right, and he sells it all incredibly well.
Absolutely, right. And a lot of the movie, a lot of this movie is carried on his shoulders, and for a 3-hour movie, that's a really demanding part to play. And I would say that he definitely succeeded in every aspect in terms of like carrying this movie from beginning to end and making us feel sympathy.
Most of it.
Right,
he's in most of it. The only times he's not in it are whenever we cut back to Ithaca and spend time with, his wife and son and mother and all that's going on. But for the majority of the film, it's him and his guys going on this quest to return home.
And given that a large part of the movie, up until a certain point, he is with his crew of men all the way, and he does have a very believable relationship, a kinship, a brotherhood with his men.
Yes. I forgot to mention before that one of the producers of this film was Francis Ford Coppola.
Yes, that's true. That's very, very true.
As well as Nicholas Meyer, who people might know as the director of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Ah, wow.
As well as Star Trek VI, The Voyage Home. Or, no, 4. That's 4. No, he didn't. He wrote that one. He directed 6, Undiscovered Country. Point is, he's done things.
Yeah. He's involved in the even-numbered good Star Trek movies.
Exactly. So there's some real prestige behind the scenes in this thing. Well, one thing that I really admire about this film is that it just fucking starts. You hit play on part 1, and like it just
already he's running.
He's running. He's trying to get to his wife. In this case, it's because she's giving birth. And then they have the baby. He holds the baby up. And,
you see the kingdom of Ithaca it already establishes his goal. It shows the most valuable things in his life, and it does a really good job at telling this like parallel story between what Odysseus is up to and what Queen Penelope and his son Telemachus are up to. So it's kind of it's a great way of constantly reminding you what's going on in Ithaca, his home country, his kingdom, and so it's like, this is where he's going, this is what he's fighting for, this is what he's trying to get back to, and this is when you get there, you already know the deteriorated state that the kingdom has fallen to. Right.
He holds up Telemachus, Telemachus, however you want to pronounce it.
It's Tetopolis.
It's Tetopolis, yeah. And he shows him his kingdom. It's a bit of a Lion King, everything the light touches moment.
Right.
And then immediately he looks out to the sea, and just this fleet of Greek ships are coming into the harbor, and bam, we're in the Trojan War. Right.
And they really skipped over. They heavily abridged the Trojan War. But
sure. Well, that would be a whole other 3-hour miniseries.
Right. I mean, they even made a whole movie with Brad Pitt just about the Trojan War.
Well, the BBC just 2 years ago did an entire Trojan War miniseries. It was 8 parts long, 8 hours, and it's a bit controversial. But
really, why is that? Did they pull another thing? Did they give him a case of the not gays?
No, they didn't actually. They leaned in heavily on the gays.
Wow. Okay. Good for them.
No, the controversy came from the choice of casting in certain roles. In which Achilles and his friend / lover, why am I blanking on the name? Patroclus are both, as well as some other characters. But those are the two big ones. Are black in it.
Okay.
Which is strange, considering that it takes place in ancient Greece.
Yeah. I mean,
not that there weren't black people around, but I'm pretty sure Achilles was supposed to be a Greek person. Zeus was also black, but that's not as controversial because he's a fucking god.
He's a god. Yeah, exactly.
He can look however the fuck he wants.
He can look like Morgan Freeman.
Right. So yeah, it's there's some controversy around that, and also there's some narrative issues with the thing. It's not a perfect miniseries.
I see then, and I guess since we already touched a little bit on that topic, that is an aspect that very much so is indicative of the time this series was made. And we mentioned before, like, a lot of these characters were like a good chunk of like ancient Greek culture was very much into homosexuality, and a lot of that has been cut out of a lot of early, on practically every. You feel free to correct me, but I feel like every single time Greek mythology has been adapted into American entertainment, whether it's the Harryhausen movies, Disney's Hercules, or the Odyssey, they make sure to cut out or exercise out that aspect of Greek culture as much as they could, and make it all about manly men and just dudes being bros,
Right. I feel like it gets hinted at sometimes, but yeah, they never really quite go there with the example, as I mentioned, in that Troy miniseries that I was just talking about. It's very explicit that Achilles and Patroclus are lovers, and they have a three-way with this other girl, and it's a whole thing. So that was very explicit with it. Other than that, I can't think of any other examples. They made a joke out of it in the 300 movies. There's that line in the first 300 where Leonidas refers to the Athenians as a bunch of boy lovers, and then which is funny because Sparta was way gayer than Athens, way gayer. Like you were allowed to be gay in Athens. Everybody was in Sparta. Like if it was part of the military training, it was supposed to like make your bonds as a unit closer. So it's like way gayer.
Right. I think like correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like back in those times, men preferred to be gay over straight, and the only reason why they slept with women was for the practicality of reproduction.
In many cases, that was true. especially in Sparta, way gayer than Athens. And then in the second movie, they kind of turned it back around. And there's a scene where one of the Athenian characters refers to the Spartans as boy lovers, and so clearly it's just an insult that gets hurled back and forth in that universe.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. They don't really. They tend to avoid it where possible.
And again, 1997. So what could you do back then?
Right. Interesting. Before we mentioned, Hercules and Xena, those two television series. There are strong. There's strong implications, especially in Xena, that something is going on between her and the blonde chick. I forget her name. Gabrielle, I think.
Right. Her sidekick. Right.
And then in the Hercules show, he also has like a little man person who goes around with him on his adventures. I don't know if the...
This is my servant Patsy.
Yeah. I have a feeling that there's much more not gays going on in that, because we're sort of fine with lesbians.
That's kind of sad but true there, yeah. That's the interesting sort of hypocrisy in American culture.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a thing. There's not a ton of that in the Odyssey, though, I don't think. At least not from what I can remember, so it's not really an issue here.
Yeah, very much like whether or not there was any of that sort of stuff, which may likely be in the original myth, but in the context of this film alone, it's definitely more of a brothership. Not brothership? That's not a real word. A strong brotherly bond between Odysseus and his men. It's very believable. Of course, there are certain individuals in his crew that are far closer to Odysseus than others, and those would be the kind of people who would screw everyone over on multiple occasions. And my mind immediately goes to the part where there's that part where Aeolus gets that bag of wind. I wonder if that's where the idiom "you old bag of wind" ever came from.
I don't know.
But he brought in like the south winds, so that it contained it in a big tight bag in order for Odysseus to sail across the northern winds to Ithaca. And then because those guys wanted to say, what's in the bag? It's probably gold or treasure or something. They open it, and it's kind of like the funniest delivery. Like, there's 2 points. As much as I like the acting overall here, there are 2 points in the miniseries that I thought the acting was a little bit over the top. One would be like, when the wind escapes the bag, and it's like throwing the entire boat farther and farther away from Ithaca, and Odysseus is constantly shouting, "You betrayed me! You betrayed me!" Yeah.
To be fair, though, I would be pissed. Do you have any idea how long it would take, especially back then, to sail from Troy to Ithaca? If anybody here listening to this has played Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you know that Ithaca is like on the opposite side of Greece from where he would have had to sail like around, like, it would be the worst thing. The worst thing ever. So like, it's so painful. It's always the worst part of the myth. He's almost there.
Yes, I know. I felt for him. Like, as silly as the acting was, I felt for him every single second of that scene. It was so painful, because, like, I know the feeling of when you're so close to finishing something, and then you gotta start all the way back from the beginning. It's like, fuck.
It's like you're there, you can almost smell home, and then the next thing you know, you're delayed at the airport. That's what happened to him. Yes. He was delayed at the airport.
Oh god, I know that feeling. All too well. But the other scene was when his mother, it's been like a good number of years now, and so Odysseus' mother has kind of like, she believes that her son is dead, and out of grief, she ends up wanting to commit suicide by essentially walking into the ocean, and Penelope is trying to tell her not to, because it's like, not only does she not want her to die in general, but like she feels like that Odysseus' mother,
she feels like she's a mother to her as well.
Yes, and she's like an emotional rock for her, she's provided so much emotional support for her up to that point. And there's this
also kind of get the sense that maybe Anticlea was kind of running things around there while Odysseus was gone. Like, Penelope is the queen, but Anticlea seems like the person who really like gets shit done, you know?
Very true. Yeah. I would say so. And so there's that part where she marches in front of Anticlea, stretches out her arms and shouts, "No!" And like, I'm sorry, it's like, that was just another one of those moments for me where it's like, okay, I think we're going a little bit over. It's like the acting is a little bit like, how to say, exaggerated in this scene, in this one moment.
If you were the director in this case, you would be like, that's getting to be a lot.
Maybe ease up on the melodrama there.
Maybe one less O in that no. I'm sorry. That's
I guess the only other scene I can think of in terms of like exaggerated acting would be from Christopher Lee when he's laughing maniacally, but I love that scene, so I have no problem with it at all.
Yeah. If you need somebody to laugh maniacally, who better than Christopher Lee? I mean, that's just a best case scenario right there.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want to go home? Well, I'll tell you how you can go home, but you're gonna get fucked. I can tell you that.
You bitch.
Coming in here throwing goats in my fiery lake, my fiery river. Stay out of your dead mom for me.
Right. So you're right. They do. It's very much the Spark Notes version of the Trojan War at the beginning. They give you the barest basics of what the Trojan War was.
Yeah.
Mainly
letting you know what it's all about from Odysseus's perspective. I don't think they go at all into the whole kidnapped princess sort of deal between like the two warring factions.
No, I don't think they explained that. I don't think they explained why the war started. They certainly didn't show very much. They basically showed two things. They showed the famous scene where Achilles kills Hector and then drags his body behind his chariot.
Yeah.
And they pretty much cut from that to, hey guys, let's do the Trojan horse.
Right, although wasn't there like a funeral for Achilles because like they immediately cut to his death right afterwards?
Yeah. You see Achilles. I don't know if they showed him getting shot in the heel. I don't know.
No, they didn't. They skipped over that iconic part.
Yeah, they just go straight to him being burned.
Not living anymore.
Not being alive anymore. There's an old episode of Family Guy. Stewie goes, I don't want to kill her. I just don't want her to be alive anymore. So yeah, that happens, and then it's like Trojan horse time.
Right. And that's a really impressive Trojan horse for a practical effect.
It's pretty well done. Yeah, there have been a lot of screen renditions of the Trojan horse, and I think this is a pretty solid one.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of local seer guy comes out and says the famous line, "Beware the Greeks and their gifts," which is still an expression to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Before he gets eaten by a sea serpent.
Right, and that's like one of the few moments where it's like, this movie does rely on, the few moments that the movie relies on CGI, and this is one like maybe, it's good for the most part, because when you see the sea serpent, like, wrangling him over the ocean, like, they do a lot of interesting, like, quick cuts and editing techniques, so that you don't...
It's mostly practical. It's mostly a practical serpent wrapped around him, and him, like, squirming around pretending to be struggling. Mm-hmm. And then they cut from that to the CG version of it that's actually dragging him into the sea, which doesn't look as good.
Right, and like for the most part it's like very far away. You don't get a good look at the CG serpent, but it's like there's one shot where they decided, I don't know why they did this, but I guess they were that confident in their effects back in 97. They had a close-up shot of one last shot of the sea serpent just like tossing him into the water, or dunking him into the ocean, never to be seen again. And that's the shot where it's like, ooh, you could have easily edited that out. It was good enough when it was far from a distance.
And it's the thing with 90s CG, where it's like, it just doesn't feel like it has weight. It moves in a strange way. It's like too quick.
And it's just like has a very waxy, rubbery feel that it doesn't match with the rest of the environment.
Right, and I didn't pay close enough attention to the shot to notice this, but I feel like it probably wasn't interacting with the water as well as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Either. So yeah, that's true. It doesn't look fantastic, but then we get the sacking of Troy, which is always a bittersweet moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get Odysseus's boast to Poseidon. Now, I love the fact that in this series, we never actually see Poseidon as like just a dude. Right. There is a very good, one of the best, CG effects in this thing. Probably the best CG effect is they do sort of like Brendan Fraser's The Mummy when Arnold Vosloo put his face in the sand. They do that with the water whenever Poseidon is talking to Odysseus. It's like a wave will come up and then Poseidon's face will like go up with the wave and then it'll crash and then another wave will come up and Poseidon's face will come up again like he's just like rolling across the sea. It's a very interesting effect and it looks really cool.
And it just makes him far more menacing that, like, you only get little glimpses into his presence, but never actually see him in a physical state at all throughout this movie. Like, you can feel his presence throughout the movie, especially given the fact that he's, like, the king of the ocean. He's the god of the ocean, and the ocean is the primary means for which Odysseus needs to sail home. And so you can tell, it's almost like the shark from Jaws. You can tell the shark is lurking somewhere, but you just can't see it. But you know the shark is going to strike at any moment. Because
there are other gods and goddesses in the story who we do see just as like in human form, just walking around like people. Most notably, Athena, Aeolus, who we already mentioned, Hermes on a couple occasions.
And then what was it, Calypso? I think Calypso counts as a god.
Yeah. Her and Circe, they're sort of minor goddesses. They're like nymphs, basically, which they're still considered gods, but they're not like major gods. Like they're not on the same level as like an Athena or a Poseidon.
True. And it's very good that they didn't like do any. They were very keen on including characters who did play a role in the story. They felt like I feel like they could have easily have just thrown in every god like they did with like Clash of the Titans or Hercules, where they could have easily
cut to Mount Olympus and then like fucking Zeus is up there and he's like, Poseidon, why don't you cut this guy a break? You know, fucking.
He's like, fuck you, bro. You can't tell me what to do.
He came up with that horse plan. You like horses? Fucking.
He's like, nah, son, he blinded one of my children. I can't let him get away with that. No way. Well, you know what kind of people who does that, assholes.
They could have done something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, they didn't.
Right. And so it's very nice that we get like a little slice of this like larger world that they've established. And it's pretty much like, you can tell this is like a very where we are getting like a small peek into this fantastical world of Greek mythology, and that it abides by its own rules in terms of how this world works and how the gods play a role in everything, especially when it comes to the underworld, the land of the dead. And this is another.
That's an interesting thing that we could talk about.
Definitely, yeah.
The depiction of the underworld in this. Not super Greek.
No, this is very much so Judeo-Christian hell right here.
Yeah, there's a tendency to be like, oh, Hades is like hell, therefore.
Because death is bad in American culture.
Right. Therefore, it's got to be all scurry. You know, we don't just do this to Hades. We do this with other mythologies as well.
Anubis.
You know? Anubis.
Remember they made him the bad guy from Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie?
They did. Anubis is a big one. Hela from Norse mythology.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a death god, Kali, it's typically portrayed in a very negative way.
Right. And yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Because it sounds scurry, you know? Right. It's a death god, and people who worship it are technically part of a death cult, and it's like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. But
yeah, and
so in Greek mythology,
go ahead, yeah.
In Greek mythology, the underworld is just a place. It's just a different plane of existence. It's
Right.
there's like a really nice part where all the people who were good in life hang out, and then there's also a sucky part where the bad people, are punished for being assholes. Like it's both. It's kind of heaven and hell at the same time, and that never really gets portrayed at all.
Right.
It's always fire and brimstone. In this, it appears like the entrance to hell is literally like inside of a volcano, and there's like lava flowing down the walls and just like fire constantly dripping from the ceiling.
And like you see good people, like you see one of Odysseus's men who died early on from the Cyclops. You see he meets his own mother in a very heartbreaking moment where he realizes his mother's now dead. And like these are good people as far as we can tell in the context of the film, and they don't get to enjoy any peace whatsoever.
Yeah, it just seems like the afterlife just sucks balls in this universe.
Yeah.
It's like fun.
And that's what.
Thank goodness, at least they didn't like have Hades himself be in it, because that they would have made him all scurry like they always do.
Right. Like, if you remember, like the God of War version of Hades, he's just like a big hulking dude with like a what do you call it, like a blacksmith helmet hiding his scary skull face.
Yeah. There's always a lot of that, or like in Disney's Honey, You Mean Huncules, where he's the fucking scary face and the flaming hair and fucking James Woods.
That's the scariest part right there. The whole James Woods deal.
The James Woods, yeah.
That was something I wanted to mention in my.
I think one of my favorite adaptations of Hades, even though they still did this shit, was in the Justice League cartoon, where he was evil and he was basically Satan, but at least he just looked like a dude, At least he comes out of the portal and he's just like a guy with like a black beard and long hair,
Yeah,
that's probably what he would have looked like.
Right. It's like, hey man, I just deal with dead people, all right? I didn't ask for this job.
No, he didn't.
Like, well, go talk to your daddy Zeus, okay? He was the one who assigned me this job. God damn it! I didn't ask to be part of this.
I don't like it down here. Of course, then they kind of fucked it up in the Justice League cartoon, because he come out looking just like a normal dude in armor, but then he like gets this scary like weird like rat face later on. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Justice League.
Right.
So at least they didn't have some sort of like craptastic version of Hades show up and be like, "What are you doing here?
Yeah,
this is the land of the dead. You're not dead. Get the fuck out.
Yeah, get off my fucking burning lawn.
Get off my lawn.
Get off my freaking lawn."
Yeah.
I did want to mention something like, this is essentially like a continuation from the little subject I talked about a bit in our review for Las Momias de Guanajuato, where there is like a very stark difference between how Americans treat death and how Mexican culture they treat death. And I didn't exactly word it properly enough. I do want to apologize by stating I mentioned something along the lines of, Americans tend to treat death, in American culture, they tend to treat death with more reverence. And I do apologize, because no, it's definitely more of along the lines of like Mexicans do treat death with reverence. It's just, it's never seen as much in a negative light as much as it is in America. Like you mentioned before, like in this review just now, Dylan, we see death as like a very frightening, scary concept. Whereas in Mexican culture, and I guess even in Greek culture, I'm assuming, they see death as just a natural part of life. Where there's life, there is also death. There's a beginning, there's an end. It's just the natural cycle of life, and they've accepted it and made it a part of their culture. And I guess like that is what I was trying to convey in the previous video. And I feel
in Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, there's a lot of emphasis on like fatalism. Basically, it's this concept that the fates they decide what's going to happen to you, and a lot of Greek villains in various myths go down the wrong path by getting some sort of a scary prophecy about their future and then trying to
avoid
prevent it. to trying to prevent it from happening. This is what happened, to the guy from the Jason and the Argonauts story, for example. So yeah, it's I think the Greeks had a very sort of, death sucks, but what are you gonna do? Like,
yeah, pretty much, yeah. And it's kind of like it plays a lot into the themes of this movie as well, where it's like, it's all really so much about humility, where a lot of these Odysseus, much like a lot of Greek heroes or Greek protagonists, they feel like they can do anything. They are above everything. They have this massive amount of ego, a lot of what do you call it? Arrogance, and that's eventually what leads to their folly. They're supposed to, like, Odysseus's big lesson, his big takeaway from all of this is to learn that, like, in the context of the movie, it's like with Poseidon has like one last torture session with Odysseus in the middle of a storm. Right before he reaches Ithaca, Poseidon says, like, you have to learn that you are nothing without the gods. And I guess, like, the translation of that or how would I say, like, I guess the translation to that for the real world, for us to take away from, is that us humans, we aren't as powerful as we think we are. There's always something far greater than us that we cannot fully control. There are certain elements in life that we can never fully control. So there are certain things that are out of our grasp. And, like, without those elements, we ourselves would be nothing.
Yeah.
And, like, here, whether it's, like, the weather, the earth, the atmosphere, the forces of nature, whether it's earthquakes, volcanoes, thunderstorms, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, what have you. And just in the world of the Greek gods, the gods themselves are just simply the personifications of these like, uncontrollable forces.
Right. And I think that's a very nice spin that they put on it. I don't know if that's necessarily the intent behind the original myth, because in the original mythology, it's more so just like, gods are fucking dicks, you do something to piss them off, and it's not good.
Yeah. I guess that's also something that you can easily learn from. A lot of it is like, hey, don't be an egotistical asshole.
You're gonna piss off some god. No,
or just you're gonna piss off somebody, and then it's gonna bite you in the ass big time eventually. Karma's gonna catch up to you sooner or later.
There's an instance from the beginning of the Trojan War, before the Greeks even set sail across the sea, when they're making their preparations to go across. King Agamemnon accidentally kills one of Artemis's sacred deer. And then she gets all pissed off and, like, causes all these storms, and so they can't leave the shore. And, like, they try sacrificing things to her to appease her, but basically she demands a human sacrifice, and so Agamemnon winds up having to sacrifice his own daughter. Like, it's a whole thing. Point being, the gods are dicks in Greek mythology. They're just constantly fucking with shit. And Zeus is just banging everything that moves. And Hera's just killing everybody he bangs.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like Mother Nature is also a dick, Mother Nature doesn't have to constantly throw a lot of shit at us, but it does. So maybe that's where the whole idea of gods being dicks came from.
Oh, it's exactly where it came from. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Like, hey, Zeus, do you really have to, throw a lightning bolt and burn all my crops? No.
Yes.
Can just like,
always.
Yes, always. Let's see. We were talking about effects earlier before, since that was what led to our discussion of Poseidon. We talked about the underworld, and the underworld definitely relied heavily on green screens, and there's a good chunk of green screen work throughout this movie. And
I will say, whatever they did to those ghosts, there's something going on with, like, the makeup or something. They look really cool. It's kind of a shame now that in today's industry they would just be CGI ghosts, because I think there's something so much creepier about like compositing a person into a shot and, like, making them look like a ghost. Something about it just is scarier looking to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's
than like the fucking whatever that bitch's name was, that ghost from the beginning of Ghostbusters 2016. You remember that shit?
Oh yeah, yeah, where she turns all like into a CG cartoon essentially.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, remember the librarian scene from the original? Isn't this like that? And you go, no, that was good.
And she didn't need to, spew out a bunch of slime, green slime, puke slime.
No.
But anyways, yeah, I do agree that the ghosts were definitely very much so well handled there. The green screening with the Cyclops was also very well done. The compositing worked very well to their benefit. A lot of the
everything about that Cyclops scene, I love everything about it. That it's probably the most iconic scene in the movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the famous scene, of course, where they blind the Cyclops, and then he says, "Nobody has blinded me," which is always one of the more clever aspects of the myth.
Yeah, and it definitely helps that the whole scene was dimly lit, so that I feel like it helped hide the green screening a lot better than it would if the whole scene was if there was any sort of if there was any more lighting than there was in the final product.
I really love the actor who plays Polyphemus the Cyclops, whoever he is.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he did a good job, and I really was not prepared when I saw this for the first time again in school in a classroom. For the moment where he bites that dude in half.
Oh yeah, I remember. I was like, oh shit! They actually showed his half eaten corpse there.
Yeah, it's such a terrifying scene. He grabs that guy up, and Odysseus goes, "No, men don't eat each other." And he just goes, "Cyclops do," and then he fucking bashes the guy's head on the rock or whatever. It's it's brutal and really well done.
Absolutely right. And I think the only time where the green screening was a little bit shaky was whenever they were showing Hermes floating in the air, and they did the best they could, I feel. But you can't help but feel like he's not really floating. You can tell that it's almost like a JPEG, and you're kind of moving the JPEG around.
Yeah, it almost would have been better if they had just had him appear up on the cliff above Odysseus and just talk to him that way instead of having him fly up.
I think somebody must have been a really big fan of Peter Pan and wanted to do that sort of take on him.
Sure. I mean, when you think of Hermes, you think of him flying around,
Yeah.
But I don't know. It didn't work as well as it could have, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, any other big special effects moments throughout this movie?
So you already talked about Scylla and Charybdis a little bit.
Right, yeah.
We talked about Polyphemus, the Cyclops.
I guess you could, when talking about effects, we can definitely talk about makeup effects, because I remember as we were watching the movie, you mentioned to me how they did a decent, subtle job at subtly hinting the passage of time.
Oh yeah, you can tell that everybody is getting slightly older as the film progresses.
More weathered, maybe a little bit more tired looking, a bit wrinkly. In the case of Odysseus and Penelope. As for Telemachus, obviously they had to use different actors to portray young Telemachus, kid Telemachus, and eventually young adult Telemachus. But they stuck around with adult Telemachus for a while, and so they did a decent enough passage of time there by having him with a very fresh, clean-shaven face, and then having him with a very almost prepubescent sort of beard by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Where it comes in awkwardly.
After he goes to Sparta and visits King Menelaus. This is probably the only adaptation, by the way, of the Iliad or the Odyssey that I've seen where Menelaus is a likable guy.
Which one was he? I'm sorry.
Menelaus is the king of Sparta. He's the one that
he goes to visit.
He goes to visit him.
Okay.
Any other time that you see Menelaus in any kind of adaptation, he's usually made out to be a colossal dick. Because it's usually told from the point of view of Paris and Helen, and so they need to have a reason why she wants to leave Menelaus, and so they always just make him a fucking asshole. In the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, he's a fucking asshole. He's just the same in that BBC miniseries I was talking about before. I don't think I've ever seen a version of Menelaus where he's just like, a normal guy, except for this. So that's nice. That's good.
I guess it's because he was such a minor character that they didn't really found the need to flesh him out all that much. He was just there to sort of just give Telemachus something to do while Odysseus was nearing the end of his journey. Perhaps, right. I'm not sure.
Well, he's only in it twice.
Okay,
he's in it at the very beginning. Because him and Agamemnon come to Ithaca to get Odysseus to come fight in the war, and you only see him very briefly there, and then he's in the scene where Telemachus goes to Sparta.
Right. And I guess like they already had enough assholes there with all the suitors who want to marry Penelope, and like. So it's like maybe they just wanted to give Telemachus a break by meeting someone who wasn't a dick, given all the people who are hoarding or who are taking up space in his kingdom. Right.
Big shout out to Eric Roberts, by the way. I really liked his performance as well. He does a great job of being this sort of slimy suitor, almost like a Jafar-esque sort of.
Yeah. And he tries to play it off like he's just a good guy who's just trying to. He tries to act very understanding towards Penelope and Telemachus, but you can tell he's like very backstabbing. He's just trying to play everyone, tries to pretend to be everyone's friend, so that he can then he can then come out on top.
He tries to manipulate events so that his friend, the bigger guy whose name I don't know, I don't know either of their names, but I'm like the character names, but I don't know the actor either. He tries, but the one that has the sort of rivalry between himself and Telemachus, he tries to manipulate events so that Telemachus gets killed by that guy in the ring. He rats out Penelope's like plan where she's like weaving that shroud. And then every night she goes back and undoes the work that she did. He discovers her doing that and tells the others about it, and so they burn it. He's really the only like villain in this movie, really, because there's no other like overarching like villainous characters. I unless you consider Poseidon a villain, but he's not really.
Right. Yeah.
And he's certainly an antagonist, but he doesn't really count as a villain.
Yeah,
Eric Roberts.
He is like kind of like the closest to an antagonist, given that he's like the last person they kill off, because there's like a build up to his eventual defeat.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm saying he definitely is a villainous character. I'm talking about Poseidon as more of just like an antagonist rather than a villain.
Right.
So yeah, he's very good in that role, I think.
Yeah.
And man. When they just start murdering those suitors at the end, it's glorious.
Right,
it is such a bloodbath.
It's super cathartic because you've seen these guys. They're eating all all the food in Ithaca. They're God knows how many women they're raping. They are harass people. They're harassing, just being a bunch of like frat boys who don't want to leave.
The only one that I felt sorry for was the fat guy. Because he didn't seem like he was all that bad,
Yeah.
Like he shows up at the palace and he's got like jugglers and shit. Like he seemed like a pretty fun dude,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I just feel a kinship with him as the fat guy. But I
love how he was like the first one to give up when it came to the bow and arrow test.
He's like, yeah, nobody can do this shit.
It's like, look at me. Do I look like I've ever shot a bow and arrow in my life?
Yeah. So. He's the only one that I'm like, oh, you have to kill him. He didn't do anything that bad, really.
And
got shot in the neck with an arrow.
Yeah, and I just love how like everyone is so caught up by surprise at Odysseus' reveal. Oh, by the way, Odysseus finally realizing that he's home is such a beautiful scene. Because like there's that wonderful scene where he comes up on the hut where his like old servant lives. Yeah.
And he just sits down at the table and he just starts eating the food, and he just sort of like breaks down into tears, like just tasting his native like dish or whatever. And like I told you, it was very much like the time that you came back to America from Japan for the first time, and I looked at you and I said, Andres, do you want to get Taco Bell? And you looked at me and you said, yes.
Yes. You don't know how true that is, ladies and gentlemen. I was having a good old American style slushie in one hand, I had a grilled stuffed burrito in the other. I was eating
Andres was Odysseus at that moment.
Yes, it's like, I'm home. I'm home.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Oh god, and yeah, I absolutely.
And I don't remember what Bill ate because he doesn't like Taco Bell. But
maybe we went somewhere else. We went elsewhere for him.
Yeah.
But that was a glorious moment. It's a moment that I enjoy every time I visit home again. By home I mean the good old US of A. And with the cathartic scene, it's like he shows up, he's given a disguise as an old man. There's that wonderful moment he's reunited with Penelope, and like he just wants to check on her. He wants to know. He's so ashamed. He thinks like maybe Penelope's not interested anymore. Maybe she's given up on him, but he just wants to see Penelope and confirm that she is still loyal to him, which is again a very touching scene.
Even though he boned.
Oh yeah, true. That is true. That's true. Like,
I'm just afraid that she hasn't remained loyal to me, as he lies next to Vanessa Williams.
But hey, he was thinking about her the whole time. Remember that?
Sure.
I'm kidding, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe in the context of this story, maybe he was thinking of her, and so it's okay that he was what's the word? He cheated on her, but yeah.
Well, with Calypso, it's a little bit more understandable because I think he had kind of given up hope of getting home at that point.
Yeah, and I guess with Cersei,
he washes up on her island after the whole Scylla Charybdis thing, and she's like, "Oh, there's no boats here. You're stranded." And
we're not going to let you leave.
Right, I think he just sort of gives in at that point, so I can kind of understand Calypso. And Cersei, on the other hand...
Well, he had to sleep with Cersei for the sake of his men, at least initially.
That's true. He didn't have to stay there for 5 fucking years.
Well, he thought it was 5 days, remember?
Even still, 5 days.
Yeah, that is true, yeah.
How many times can you bang Bernadette Peters before you go, you know what, maybe we should get back on the road. I love, like, so he's in his disguise. They do the whole test, and they make sure everyone's out of the room except the old man, Telemachus, and all of the suitors. And then as soon as the old man, it's like the most badass moment. You're like, let me try this here thingamabob, and he ends up doing I think what was it, the bow itself is made out of like deer antlers, and so it's made out of this like super hard, rigid material that's almost impossible to bend. But he just does it. It might have been a ram or something. Ah, okay. So he ends up like bending it with ease. He shoots the arrow through all the little rings on the weapons. And then as soon as everyone turns back to him, boom, his disguise is off, and you see him, he just strolls along in his throne, and he's like, go for it, Telemachus. And then Telemachus, like, while everyone is still in shock... We've been talking about effects. How about when Telemachus stabs the big guy, the ugly guy, with that spear, and like raises him off the ground and pins him to the wall? I'm not entirely sure how that was done, but it looked really good.
Yes, it was. I just love how, like, I didn't even think about the practicality of that effect. But I was just thinking, like, everyone just so shell shocked that it just gave Telemachus the perfect opportunity to go, fuck you! And just wipe out that guy. And then, like, it's not a very gory movie, but, like, the times in which they work around the gore, it's still very effective. I think there's even, like, one moment where, like, they cut off one dude's head, and there was, like, the way they shot and framed a lot of the kills, at least in the climax, was well done to where you're not noticing the fact that there's little to no bloodshed.
I'd say that there's only 2 really gory sequences in the movie. The first is when Polyphemus eats that guy.
Yeah.
And we see him eat that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is and really the most gory, is when Odysseus and Telemachus kill. I mean, it's an absolute bloodbath.
Mm-hmm.
And they go hardcore, like way more hardcore than like a lot of like modern Greek mythology movies go.
True. Yeah.
Like, it is so graphic, and in a way, it's more shocking than like any of the crap from like 300, because in that it's all like CGI blood and like, you know, super stylized. This just feels so real and like gritty, and they just murder all of them. And then when Eric Roberts, like, the one chick that he was banging, opens the door so that he can escape, and then right at that point they throw the spear and it goes through both of them. Like,
it's so poetic. It's like such poetic justice right there.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Oh yeah. And the eventual reunion between Odysseus and Penelope is very satisfying. And it kind of ends up quite abruptly for I guess I know I'm treating this as I'm seeing this more as a movie, but as opposed to a miniseries. But it kind of ends a little abruptly. It's just them in bed, reconfirming their love, and then it just kind of fades to black, and then the end, the credits roll.
Right.
But I guess even I wouldn't know how exactly to end the story, other than he's finally with Penelope, the very woman that he went all this way to reunite with.
I mean, the only other thing they possibly could have done is maybe given us some like last minute like narration or something from Odysseus, just
that's true.
Put a bow on the whole thing, but yeah, they just sort of go, "This is the end of the story," and that's it.
Have a good day.
That's our story. Stan's dead. Bye.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else do you want to talk about, since we are at an hour and 17 minutes, or are you ready to wrap this up?
Let's see. I'm just trying to think if there's anything we've forgotten to mention.
Let's see. I do remember Calypso's actress. I thought she looked a lot like Tyra Banks, but I know she isn't.
No.
I think that's about it for me personally.
Yeah, I'm just going through the movie real quickly in my mind, trying to think if there's anything else that needs mentioning. Oh, you know, the music in this movie is a nice touch. There's not a whole lot of like themes. Like it's a lot of sort of just like minute to minute sort of Mickey Mousing, as they call it.
Yeah.
But there is like a really nice little like a love theme between like Odysseus and Penelope, and it kind of just represents like Ithaca and like his desire to get home. And so that it's a nice little sort of I think it's on a flute, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a nice little sort of dirge to it. I really like the guy who plays Aeolus, the wind god.
Yes.
That scene,
I forgot to mention. Yeah, he's a very interesting, he's probably the most comedic character of them all. And especially among the gods, because everybody else, all the other gods that we see are sort of like upright and like proper or whatever, or like either that or like mischievous, like Hermes. Right, and Aeolus is just like super chill and relaxed. He's like, hey, I'll help you out only because I think Poseidon's a dick.
Yeah, he's got like this Brooklyn accent. He's like,
yeah.
there's this great line where he's like, he forgets the sea is nothing without the wind. And who's the god of the wind?
That's true. We haven't mentioned a lot of Athena before. Like she's a very great character. She acts as a very nice mentor for both Odysseus and later Telemachus. We forgot to mention
she's very much like the ghost of Obi-Wan. Every now and then she just shows up and goes, "Hey, you need to go do this thing." And they do a really interesting thing with her whenever she shows up. They like I don't know if it's lighting or like makeup or what, but there's just something about her whenever she's on screen. She has this sort of a glow to her. Yeah. A radiance, if you will. That's very, very godlike, very convincing, very cool.
And I guess like she also helps wrap up the story when it's like she appears only one time, as far in the context of the film. She appears one time to Penelope, just pointing her in the direction of where Odysseus is.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah, so
That's
it's like...
She doesn't show up a ton, but whenever she does, it's something
very important. Yes, yeah. So for her to appear for a moment like that helps kind of like seal the deal there. And I do like the idea that like she appears only to her strongest believers. She likes Odysseus because he's a much more intelligent or more crafty human than most people. So she takes a liking to him. I do like how a lot of people they're like, when they see the few people that interact with Athena, they're like, "Oh my God, you're Athena!" But it's like half casual, half shock when they see her, because it's not an everyday occurrence that you meet a god. But at the same time, you get the feeling that they've met her enough times to where it's not as surprising.
Right. Well, especially Odysseus seems very comfortable with her.
Yeah,
the first time we see her is in the beginning when they're sailing off to the Trojan War. She appears to him on the ship, and they're discussing sort of the men and everything. And they're very casual with one another. You get the sense that he's spoken to her on many occasions. The gods in Greek mythology will often take special interest in the particular humans. Most of the time, that's sexual interest, but not always. And good luck if you happen to be somebody that Apollo decides that he wants to bone, because that never works out well. You always wind up getting turned into a tree or some other horrible fate whenever Apollo wants to bang you. So
yeah, or God no help you if you ever end up fucking Zeus, and then either Hera gets her revenge on you, or maybe you give birth to a half human monster man,
or you get turned into a bull. Like it's not a good time.
Right. Yeah, and that just what makes like Greek mythology so amazing, because it's just so unpredictable. And like, I'm not sure if there's other mythologies out there that are as complex and as crazy as Greek mythology, but for whatever reason,
complex, yes. But I think there's something special about, you know what it is? It's characterization. The Greek gods all have really strong characterizations in a way that I don't know that like Osiris and Set or any number of
Thor,
like
Odin, maybe Norse mythology. I don't know.
Norse mythology also they do that too. And it's the gods have a lot of personality.
And it's very possible that a lot of these older myths may have well fleshed out, developed lore, but maybe a lot of it has been lost to time, unfortunately. So maybe that's why a lot of stuff isn't as talked about. I know, like the Spaniards, completely screwed over a lot of the Mesoamerican mythologies and culture and all that stuff. So
Mesoamerica is a good example. Mesoamerican mythology, what we know of it is super complex and intricate.
Yeah. But then there are some things like Quetzalcoatl that are like super vague.
Right. Or the legend of El Dorado. What is it?
Yeah. Even though that was just a legend made up by the white man.
Well, no, there was a tribe. I just recently watched a documentary series on Netflix.
Okay.
About various empires, and the last episode was about the Aztec Empire, but it was more so just like the whole American region. There was a tribe. I forget what they were called. Starts with an M. That they got the whole El Dorado thing from, but it was never really clear if it was supposed to be a city or like a golden man. There were different versions of the myth, and this tribe, like, they were obsessed with gold. Like, they used gold, like, in all these. They didn't use it as currency the way that we do. It was like a part of their religion. And so when the conquistadors came, they like tried to give them gold as like a way of saying, like, hey, we'll give them this gold and then they'll go away, and it had the exact opposite effect, obviously.
Right. I just remember there's like the city of Teotihuacan, which is like this city that kind of existed well before the Aztecs and Mayans, I believe, except it's like nobody know, for whatever reason, this entire civilization of this mysterious faction of Mesoamericans just kind of like died out, and nobody knows what happened to it, and all that's left are the few remains of this big city.
Yeah, is that the Olmecs, I think? Maybe?
I think the Olmecs is what eventually is the group that eventually turned into the Aztecs, but I could be wrong about that.
I know there was a tribe. There was a tribe called the Mexica, which is where Mexico comes from. Obviously.
Oh, you know what? Maybe the Olmecs might have turned to the Mayans, and the Mexica might have turned into the Aztecs. because the Aztecs were the people that eventually met the Spaniards, and the Spaniards eventually got the name of from Mexico from Mexicans.
Right. Whichever civilization it was, the Olmecs or whoever that built Teotihuacan, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Originally,
you got it.
I did it. They built it, then they died off, and then the Aztec people were looking for a new place to live for whatever reason, and then they found it, and then they started living there, and then
right.
It's very complicated.
But anyways, we are definitely. I
don't know how we got on. I don't know how we got on Mesoamerica.
We were talking about how Greek mythology always seems to be the most interesting compared to any other ancient mythology / lore out there.
I don't think it's a matter of complexity, because like I said, there are a lot of other mythologies that are even more complex, I would say. Like Hinduism, they have the most gods, so many gods. Who can keep track?
They got an elephant with 4 arms.
They got an elephant god. The Greeks had never even seen an elephant at that point. Not until Alexander the Great went and conquered India. So I don't think it's a matter of complexity. I think it's a matter of pathos. I think it's that they characterized their gods in a very interesting way, where they were basically big shiny humans, and they had a lot of character and
maybe it's
personality.
It's possible.
And I think that's why.
Maybe it's like also.
I think that's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's why out of all the sort of ancient pagan religions, the two that sort of get used in pop culture the most are the Greek myths and the Norse myths, because they both sort of do that. They give their gods a lot of personality. And then third is Egypt with the fucking mummies and the Yu-Gi-Oh and all of that.
And the Yugi-Mans and the Pokios.
Yeah.
And also it's perhaps it's the relatability of their protagonists and their and their gods. They contain so many lessons on humility that are very relatable to any generation, really. And perhaps that's what helps these legends stand the test of time.
There's also the historical reasons, which is that Greek culture is where our culture started and came from. Really, they invented democracy, and then they spread their culture all around the world with Alexander the Great, and then the Romans copied them, and then we copied the Romans. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah, indeed. So I will definitely say that I will definitely say that I fully endorse this TV miniseries as much as I did back in the day in high school. I'm very glad to have been able to refresh my mind, refresh my memory by revisiting this awesome series, and I highly recommend this.
There were several times during this watch. It was a really interesting experience as opposed to what we normally do on the show, because there were a few times during the watch where you would go, "Oh, I remember this now," or "Oh yeah, this is coming back."
It was all coming back to me. It's as if time. All the time between the last time I saw this series and that moment, it's all the time went away. It's all of a sudden those deep-rooted memories were flooding back to me.
Right, because I think when we first started, the only memory you had was of the Cyclops, where he opens up the cave and yells, "Nobody has blinded me!" That's all you remember.
And the sunlight was shining in his face.
Yeah. Oh, that's another great moment when they're like, "Let's fucking kill this Cyclops right now." And Odysseus, always the thinker, goes, "Yeah, you do that. Who's gonna open the door? Who's gonna move the stone?" And then they all go over there and try to move it themselves, and they can't make it budge.
Right. But anyways, yeah, I highly recommend I fully endorse and highly recommend the 1997 Odyssey. And so anyone who is a fan of Greek mythology, if you're a fan of the Harryhausen stuff, definitely check it out.
I agree. I also fully endorse this product. Obviously, it was my recommendation after all. Seek it out, see it. If you saw it in school, refresh your memory, revisit it. If you didn't see it in school, hey, this is an interesting gem that you can discover. There are some genuinely good performances. This movie miniseries, you got me saying it now, won an Emmy for directing. So It's a well-made, very faithful to the myth adaptation that I think anyone will enjoy. So, Andres, what are you recommending for the 18th episode of Fully Endorsed?
Well, we are going to go to the... I'm not sure if we've ever done an anime before on Fully Endorsed yet. But if not,
no.
This may...
Have we ever been...
Yeah?
I don't even know if we've ever done anything that's animated at this. Have we?
Oh, we did the Max, remember?
Oh, yes, the Max. That's true.
Yeah.
The Max.
So we're diving into the world of anime, but rather this is a very interesting collaboration between the French house music techno duo Daft Punk and a particular animation studio, along with a particular animation director, as they collaborated on bringing their 2001 album Discovery to life in the form of an animated music. I guess I'm not sure if you can call it a musical because it's all just music lifted from their album, from their Discovery album. But
right, it's like you wouldn't call The Wall a musical either. You know? Right?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting piece of entertainment that Dylan and I have definitely remembered a lot from our past, mostly due to the music videos that they took this movie, split it into music videos, and aired them on Toonami. Although there was that one music video that aired way more than any other, which was their single "One More Time." And so, if you haven't all figured it out by now, we will be talking about the 2003 animated film Interstellar 555. So tune into that if you like.
Excited about this. I've only seen the One More Time segment and the Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Is that right?
Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Yes.
Right, because there's that, but then there's also the Kanye West song where he sampled that, and I'm never sure if I'm saying that. Are they just called the same thing? Doesn't matter. The point is, those are the only two segments of the film that I've seen before, so it'll be nice to see the entire picture in its entirety.
Exactly, yes. So stay tuned next time when we talk about Interstellar 555, the story of the secret star system. Or if you want to go by how it's written, the 5 Tori of the 5 Ekrit, 5 Tar, 5 Stem.
Sounds fantastic.
Exactly. So until next time, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I've been Super DM64.
And until next time, everybody, take care.